Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Arlington Board of Selectmen. We are meeting on Monday, January 22nd, 2018 at 7:15 p.m. Selectmen's Chambers on the second floor of Town Hall at Massachusetts Avenue, Arlington, Massachusetts. My name is Joe Curo. I am joined by my colleagues, Vice Chair Kevin Greeley, Diane Mahan, Clarissa Rowe, and Dan Dunn. And we are supported in our work this evening by our Town Manager, Adam Chaplain, Town Council, Doug Heim, and our Board Administrator, Marie Kropelka. I was at the Massachusetts Municipal Association's annual meeting this past weekend, and one of the speakers, he was actually speaking on substance abuse prevention, but one of his slides happened to have a quote on it, and it said, "Rome wasn't built in a day, but it burned in just one." So we're here this evening to keep building Arlington, and we're not going to let it burn. So with no further ado, we're going to move to the first item on our agenda. Our esteemed treasurer and collector of taxes, Dean Carman, for approval. Request to place informational material and real estate tax bill. Mr. Carman.
Thank you. I'm just going to grab the citation so I can have it. So I am here to request under Chapter 60, Section 3AD, allow the Treasurer's Office for the next two tax bills to place what's essentially marketing materials for online bill collection into the tax bills that sort of, lets people know that online bill pay for real estate taxes is up and running, and if they want to stop receiving a paper bill, they can stop receiving a paper bill and start getting their bill electronically. So as a quick refresher to how this has evolved for the 10 or so people here and 5 or so people watching on TV. Over the summer, I think it was, so as you all know, back in June, we launched the new tax collection software for Munis, which also had a new front-end invoice cloud, which is a much better and more efficient way to, get your tax statement, your bill, make payments, and everything around the real estate tax collection process. I had come to the Board of Selectmen in July, and I had asked if we could endeavor to start optional online real estate tax bill pay. So it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. If you want to keep receiving a piece of paper, great. But if you feel like that piece of paper just goes into the trash like it does in my house, you can start getting your real estate tax bill online. And so, and I had said at the time that we were going to launch it for the November collection quietly, not tell anyone, to make sure it worked. In case it blew sky high, then only like 15 people would know that it blew up. So we launched it for that collection. It's actually worked we launched it in November for the February collection. It's worked really, really well because of the people coming in at the end of the year to pay their tax bill with that big rush in the new tax law. We had a whole bunch of people sign up for online bill pay. So we were expecting to have about 5 people, 10 people. We had 100 people sign up. So we actually were able to test it and make sure it would work, that the emails were processing, and so now we feel confident to move forward with a more publicly facing campaign to get people to sign up for online bill pay. So this is just one component of the other things that we'll do to encourage people, if they so choose, to sign up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carman. I'm glad you actually mentioned the end of the year rush. I was one of those ones who rushed down there, and I wanted to just publicly thank your staff, because I know in speaking with them, they were on their feet for hours on end with the lines of folks coming in to prepay. So thank you, and for the information that you gave to the residents. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments for Mr. Carman? No?
I plan to pay online. My taxes are due next week.
We have a motion by Ms. Mahan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dunn. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Fantastic.
good work,
Thanks,
dude.
Dan.
Excellent. We now move on to the consent agenda. All of these items are typically adopted with one motion and vote with limited discussion. Minutes of meetings, January 8th, 2018, reappointments, terms to expire 1/31/2021. Board of Health, Marie Walsh-Condon, MD. Commission on Arts and Culture, Stephanie Marlin-Curel and Jonathan Hyde. Conservation Commission, David White. Council on Aging, Marjorie Vanderhill. Veterans Council, Stephen Sawtell. For approval, cause an event, Arlington 2018 5K race, May 13, 2018. Julie Vakoff and Robin Olinsky, race co-directors. Request special one-day beer and wine license, 12718 at Robbins Memorial Town Hall of Thompson School. PTO winter party, Gagi DeStefanos, and request special one-day beer and wine license 2318 at Robbins Memorial Town Hall for Arlington Center for the Arts and Blue Jean Ball, Lisa Padula for the ACA. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to any of these items? Seeing and hearing none.
Move approval.
A motion by Mr. Grilli. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Dunn. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. It's unanimously approved. We now move on to appointments. Human Rights Commission. Betsy Carlton Gisan. Gisan, I apologize. Term to expire 6/30/2019. You could come to the mic and tell us a little bit about why you'd like to serve on the Human Rights Commission.
Well, I am an Arlington resident for about 4.5 years now and have 2 children that are currently in daycare here, but will be going to school in this community. And it's important to me to be in a place that is inclusive and welcoming to everybody. And it's also important to me to actually take action to help it be that way. So I'd like to be part of the Human Rights Commission. Excellent.
Thank you very much. I think you'll find a great group of folks over there. As a former member myself, I know that there's a lot of interesting matters come before the commission. We're glad that folks are still willing to step up. Any of my colleagues have anything more that they'd like to ask? Or
Move approval?
motion to approve by Ms.
Second.
Ms. Mahan, seconded by Ms. Rowe.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yes,
My
thank
pleasure.
you.
Very
Thank you.
much.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. It's unanimously approved. Congratulations. We now move on to Citizens Open Forum. Except in unusual circumstances, any matter presented for consideration of the board shall neither be acted upon nor a decision made the night of the presentation in accordance with the policy under which the open forum was established. It should be noted that there is a 3-minute time limit to present a concern or request. Do we have anyone, Ms. Kropelka, on the list? No one on the list. Is there anyone here who wished to speak to Citizens Open Forum? This is as opposed to any of the other items on the agenda. Okay, nobody signed up. Once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Citizens Open Forum is now closed. We now move on to the tree inventory report. John Ellis from the Tree Committee.
Yes. You actually get it all the way over here.
Okay, so my name is John Ellis. I'm going to be presenting the results of our tree inventory with my colleague from the Tree Committee, Maura Batts. We're supposed to auto-cycle, but they didn't.
One
They
moment,
can't
please.
hear. He's got to get close.
You can't hear?
Can you get it
Okay,
quick?
yeah, if you can move the mic closer.
You really have to
you.
talk right into it.
Yeah.
All right, so in the fall of 2016, the Arlington Tree Committee applied for a grant from the DCR. The grant was to map and inventory all of the trees of Arlington. The goal of the inventory initially was to map all of the public street trees. The tool we used, which is available online for anyone to look at, is at a website called opentreemap.org/Arlington. And when you zoom in on any part of town, you see a whole bunch of little dots like this. The green dots are trees, the brown dots are spots where there is a place for planting a tree. This map was collected by 50 different volunteers from the town who put in about 250 hours mapping all of the streets of Arlington, as well as 2 paid interns who were managed by the Tree Committee and the tree warden who worked for about 8 to 10 weeks. Each of these individual points has data on the particular tree at that location. And there's 4 different data points that we were collecting. First is, where is that tree? The species of the tree, the diameter of the tree, and a general information about the health of that tree. And the software that we use brings in a Google Street View. So here we see a Norway maple that a volunteer measured as 18 inches. There's also some interesting data about the benefits of that tree. Trees are not just things that are nice to look at or aesthetically attractive. They're actually assets for the town that provide real economic value. And using U.S. Forest Department data, they come up with estimates about what is the value of that particular tree in terms of its carbon dioxide that it's removing, the air quality improvements, and stormwater filtration of any given tree. This is what the full map looks like. And as I mentioned, we set out to map all of the public street trees, but we exceeded that. We mapped 10,750 trees. That was all of the public streets, all of the private streets, trees on schools, trees above a certain size on the bike trail, trees in the cemetery, trees in parks. One thing that you'll notice about the number 10,750 is that if you were a close reader of all of the town's previous annual reports, it says the DPW manages 20,000 trees. I think this number is a lot more accurate. And in aggregate, the benefit of these trees is quite substantial. So using, again, these Forest Tree Department estimates, these trees remove about 4.7 million pounds of CO2 on an annual basis, filter about 14 million gallons of stormwater, conserve 9 million kilowatt hours of energy per year through cooling, remove 18,000 pounds of pollutants out of the air to improve the air quality, for a total annual estimated benefit of our public trees of about $630,000 per year of annual benefits to the taxpayers of Arlington. So now that we have this data, we can start to look at, well, what is the use of this data and what will it tell us about how we'll manage the tree inventory? And 57 of the trees were identified as good. I'll pay more attention to the poor and dead trees because in the past, the way the DPW has managed trees is that it's all responsive. Somebody wants a branch removed, there's a dead tree on their street, somebody wants a tree planted. Everything is in response to something. But now that we have this data, we're able to do things like, let's find all of the fair trees that are bigger than 24 inches, large trees in fair condition that maybe we want to keep alive longer and we want to be able to maintain. And we can proactively go out and spend taxpayer money on tree care in ways that we couldn't before because now we know exactly where those trees are. Another interesting thing we can do with this data is start to look at how Arlington compares to other communities in the state and the country. And one of the ways that we do that is we look at the size of trees in town. And here we see the sizes of 4 different categories of trees in Arlington, from young trees to more established trees. And you notice the red line is the ideal distribution of trees. That's ideal because you always want to have more smaller, younger trees because there's mortality as the trees age. And what this implication is here, first of all, we have about half as many young trees as we need. The second implication is that as these trees age, the tree size of the total tree canopy in Arlington is likely to be heading down. Another way that we can analyze the data we collected is to think about diversity. Communities use something called the 30-20-10 rule. That means that you don't want to have more than 30% of your species of one family, 30% of your trees of one family, 20% of one genus, and more than 10% of one species. And in Arlington, we have 56% maples, and that's due in large part because 42% of the trees are Norway maple. Now, I want to make sure we have the right message about what that means. These Norway maples are still removing pollutants from the air, they're still filtering stormwater, they're still providing the cooling and all of the benefits to residents. However, this is a risk. And it's a risk factor because should there become a pest that only attacks Norway maples or only attacks maples, you can lose a tremendous amount of your canopy very quickly. This is not a hypothetical situation. The city of Worcester had a huge population of ash trees. There is a pest called emerald ash borer. It hit the city of Worcester very hard. There were people in Worcester who lived on tree-lined streets when they went to work in the morning, and when they came home, there were no trees on their street because the city had to remove them all because of emerald ash borer. So you want to be sure that your canopy has some diversity so that you avoid a situation where all of a sudden some pest comes and you have to remove all of these trees. A final way we can look at how we compare to other cities is that many cities set a goal of let's have 90% of the places we can have a tree, 90% of our tree wells with a tree. In Arlington, we're at about 58%. So there's quite a lot of space for trees. And you know, it's very difficult to plant a lot of trees. Currently, Arlington is planting about 200 a year. If we move that to 300 a year, it's still going to take 40 years before we can get to 90% density. If we do 800 a year, which is probably not a realistic goal, considering the effort it takes to plant a tree and water a tree, we do that much faster. So this is some data that my colleague Moore has collected.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of trees in Arlington and how we got our tree-lined streets. If you go back far enough, there were hardly any trees, especially in East Arlington. It was all farmland. A few of our streets, like you saw in one of the pictures, were lined with stately elms, Pleasant Street and Lake Street, and that's where our town seal comes from, is the two stately elms, the gateway from Cambridge on Mass Ave into Arlington. As land was sold for development in the 20s and 30s, the town started planting trees, and they were planting about 300 trees a year and removing about 50. In the 40s and 50s, as new streets were constructed, we planted several hundred trees each year to line them, and we continued to remove far fewer than that, except in hurricane years. In the 60s and 70s, we were routinely planting more than 400 trees a year. Then, in 1980, for the first time, we removed more trees than we planted. And since 1980, Arlington has had a net loss of over 2,000 trees. Our street tree canopy has now been in decline for 40 years. We now plant 200 trees a year, and only once in the last decade have we planted more trees than we removed. And this is not the case for neighboring towns. And this data is all coming from annual reports of each town going back 10 years. There are so many threats to urban trees, but here are a few that pertain specifically to Arlington. First and foremost is insufficient water. The main reason we can't just plant more trees right now is because we don't have the staff or the funding to water them. Second, as John mentioned, the emerald ash borer has already wiped out entire populations of ash trees in parts of the state and now threatens 900 of our trees. The third is extreme weather, droughts, blizzards, hurricanes, which accounts for the loss of several hundred trees in Arlington every decade or so. And perhaps most familiar to this board is the damage caused by new constructions and urban development in general. So here's a picture of a house on Warren Street in 2007 with a healthy, mature street tree in front of it. That is the new house that was built there. The second picture is 2011, and you can see what happened to the tree. Full disclosure, this is my house, although I was not the builder. This is all to say that we cannot take our tree canopy for granted. It is the result of nearly a century of planning and funding and care. Thank you.
So I have two more slides and then I'm done. We're very appreciative on the tree committee that the town manager's budget includes funding for the tree warden. There's a lot of benefits that Tim has brought, including making sure that contractors are planting trees correctly, which is no small issue. We've had problems with that. Making sure that people who illegally take down trees are follow the procedures. But here is one more data point that you can use, and these are the receipts, the net receipts of the, total receipts of the Trees Please Fund. The Trees Please Fund is where money goes when you cut down a public street tree or the new bylaw money goes. 2014, we had an active tree warden. We collected, an acting tree warden, we had collected a grand total of $25.66 in that fund. In 2015, it was better. In 2016, the tree committee, working with the DPW, set up a new fee structure so that the removal fees were based on the size of the tree, not just a flat fee per tree. That helped bring in more money. By 2017, we have the bylaw active. We have a new tree warden. We've collected $11,000, and now only 6 months into fiscal year 2018, we're already at $11,000. So there's actual dollar payback to having a tree warden and to enforcing our laws. And the final things I'll leave you with is that this data is not going to end here, the analysis of this data. On Wednesday, I'll be going with Town Planner Jenny Raitt to a class at BU. There's a graduate class which is going to be massaging Arlington's data and looking at heat islands. And they did some initial assessment in the fall, and I have two slides. This first slide shows aerial views of the total tree canopy in town. The darker areas mean there's more trees. This is public and private trees. This is satellite imagery. So the dark spots are where there's a lot of trees, and the lighter spots are where there are fewer trees. And this next slide is where it's warm or hot in Arlington. And this is average land temperature at 10 a.m. in the morning in July and August. And you see there's quite a variation in different parts of town. And the spots where it's hot are the spots where there's no trees. So this is something we'll be looking at with Boston University, and they're going to hopefully help us plan and better figure out how to manage our heat islands and use trees to the benefit that they can. So that's all I have for you, and thank you very much for taking the moments to listen to me.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I think some of my colleagues have some questions. Ms. Rowe?
Yeah, thank you so much for all your hard work. It's great. One of the other things that wasn't mentioned in the history of Arlington trees is in the 1990s, the Natural Resources Department was put under the DPW, and the staffing was cut dramatically, and now Natural Resources under DPW, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's very efficient, but it also means that the priorities for funding are not the priorities that the head of the Natural Resources Department has made. And the other thing I've heard, and I would like to ask you is there, somebody told me that you're not going to plant any more acers, which are maples, because you have so many Norway maples, and I would urge you not to go that route. The one bad maple, the Norway maple, is a problem, and you should be looking at that, but the other maples are really hardy plants and probably do better as street trees than most plants. I'm a registered landscape architect, and I've dealt with trees for 40 years. I noticed that you haven't looked at the urban canopies of Menominee Rocks Park and the sort of the Mugar property and Robbins Farm. And I would suggest in the future years you do that to make sure that we're really maintaining our large trees that are really giving those neighborhoods a lot of protection. And I think that's all my ranting and raving.
Anyone else have any other questions or comments? Yeah, Mr. Piscrillo.
So, well, so the 10,000, what was the number, 10,000 what?
We mapped 10,750 trees, and about 8,700 are street trees, and the rest are parks and schools and stuff.
But didn't count in Menominee Rocks Park, did I understand?
So what we did was, we did not map every tree. We mapped the trees that we thought that DPW might someday have to manage or be concerned about. So if there was a big tree right next to the path, which could fall and hurt somebody, we wanted to record that. But if there was some tree in the middle of Menominee Rocks Park away from a path, DPW doesn't really, that's not a concern to
They
them.
actually do maintain them when you call about it.
In the middle of the park?
Yes, oh yes, absolutely. They're very responsive.
Yeah, I think that they don't, I mean, I think they don't are not proactively concerned about those trees. Yeah, as much as something that could hurt a
But I
person.
was curious, is that the difference between them reporting 20,000 and this saying 10,000? Are there that many in Menominee Rock Park and?
That could be the
Mugar
difference.
property and-
Yes.
But where does the 20,000 come from? I mean,
Yeah, whatever.
you know.
I'm not trying to get picky.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I think that is the difference, yes, yeah.
I think they should have focused on the street trees first. I think that's very important.
But that was an excellent report. Thank you both very much. Brief, but filled with a lot of very good information, which was excellent. Thank you. I don't know, what's it cost to plant a tree? So in other words, for us, we're currently doing, there's like, I'm sure a range, but if we're currently planting 200, what would it cost us to get to 300? Or can we quantify that?
It sounds like a simple question. It's not always a simple answer. A tree that we buy, the tree, costs about $100. Currently, those 200 trees are planted by DPW staff, so it's sort of baked into the number. If you want to get a contractor to put that tree in the ground, it's probably another 400, so up to $500. Now, if you want that tree to live, you need to water it, and the contractor, generally, they just hope that it rains. So if you want to be sure that contractor waters that tree, you might have to pay that contractor another $200 a year to keep the tree watered. That's what Cambridge is paying, about $900,000 a tree. We are hoping $900 to $1,000 for one tree.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
900
Wow,
yeah,
that's
sorry.
a lot of money. Sorry.
We are hoping that we can work with Mike and DPW to come up with some strategies that make it not so much money. Cambridge has these summer intern staffs. They ride around on a bike with a hose. They connect the hose to the hydrant, and they water bags. So there may be ways that we can get it, maybe 500 a tree, 400 a tree, depending. But it's a hard nut to crack, and I don't have a firm data for you. But in general, say 500 to 800 per tree.
Well, that's a very good answer, thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Dunn.
you, Mr. Chair.
Do I remember that we pay for more trees than just the Trees Please Fund? There's a line that comes out of DPW that's paying for
Yes.
a lot of this as well, right?
That's
Okay.
right.
I think the manager has an answer.
I'll
Yeah,
let
no,
you
go
finish,
ahead.
and then I'll jump in if you'd like.
I got another one. Go ahead, please.
So I'll take the entree to say, yes, there's an existing line in the Natural Resources Division of DPW that for the past maybe 5 or 6 years is at a $40,000 line item for tree planting. In the FY19 budget, which is on the board members' desks, we're increasing that by an increment of $25,000, as well as making a recommendation to take an additional $25,000 out of the McEachern Fund, which is that bequest the board received a couple of years back for tree planting in Arlington. So that would bring up total available planting dollars to $90,000 a year, as well as making a recommendation to move the tree warden from about 2/3 time to full-time to further enhance tree maintenance, planning, and planting. So we're trying to make efforts working with the tree committee in the FY19 budget recommendation.
Do I remember we have used contractors in the past when DPW was understaffed or had problems with prioritization? Okay. And this, John, I guess this may be a question for you, but maybe it's you and Mike, or you and Mike and the town manager. So there are a lot of people in Arlington who have personal passion about this issue, and you can, and those people, if they happen to be at a place where the watering can happen, would be excited about that opportunity. Have we tried creating like a volunteer, to match the holes and the trees we want to plant with those volunteers? Or is there just it doesn't make sense, there's no overlap there?
I think it needs somebody to manage it.
We've got a great tree committee.
It's, I don't want to speak on Mike's behalf, but his anxiety, which I think is well-placed, is that if you have a volunteer group that's watering the trees, that's great, but if, those trees need to be watered at a specific time. And if there's a drought the second week in July and everyone's on vacation and there hasn't rained for 2 weeks straight, and you've got to water, this year's trees, last year's trees, and previous years, and most of your volunteers are gone, that's a big risk. Mm-hmm. So I think there are opportunities, and we, every bag has a flyer on it, please water. Everyone who signs up to plant a tree says, I agree to water the tree. The town is sending out emails to water the trees. I think there is more opportunity, and I know that in Cambridge, part of the job of those people who ride around on the bikes is to educate and find a patron for each tree to water it.
I was definitely thinking about that model than I was about roving volunteers.
Okay.
I was definitely thinking about for instance, your house with its stump in 2011. I suspect that you'd be excited to water a tree, and get that replaced. And I don't know if that sort of location-based volunteering is possible. That was just my thought.
I had a question. You listed up there a milestone around the passage of the bylaw. I'm just wondering about some observations about how well the bylaw has been working.
I think it's working well. I think there is some confusion in the, why is it that there's different pricing for the bylaw and different pricing for the public street trees? And I think that Susan Stamps and other people on the tree committee are trying to think about ways to improve how that's working. I think it's working fairly well. We're continuing to try to do education. There'll be a poster at the building department explaining all the rules. I think that it does rely on residents to be knowledgeable about it and to call the tree warden. So there's a little sort of duplication of effort where the tree warden gets a bunch of calls from 5 different neighbors all saying, did you know about somebody took a tree down here, and is it part of the process? But I think it's working, and I mean, many communities are doing it. Concord just passed one, $300 an inch is what they're going to charge. And it's not a, as an aside, this is a big regional issue. Cambridge did a study, which we haven't been able to do yet, but they looked at the decline in the tree canopy from 2007 to 2012 or something like that, using aerial maps and looking at private trees as well as public trees. And they lost like 15% of their tree canopy in 7 years. And they'll lose even more over the coming years because of bigger houses and bigger lots. And, we have this green communities program in the state, but it's not really considering actual greenness. It's considering energy, conservation. And towns, every town is having issue with how do we plant trees, how do we keep them alive, and how do we keep, keep private people from clear cutting their lots, so.
Yeah.
Actually, the governor of the Commonwealth is spending $9 million a year on planting trees, and it's called Greening the Gateway Cities, and it's been tremendously, and they're looking at the effects of trees on energy prices, and as you've been talking about, the heat island effect, and they're doing it in a variety of different ways. DCR is doing some of the tree planting, and they're letting some of it privately, and they're also getting the cities to help out. So I think that this is not just an Arlington concern, but it's now the state environmental leaders are also taking on the challenge, which is great.
Thank you. So do we have any further questions, comments, or motion to receive?
Move to receive.
A motion by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Greeley.
Thank
Any
you so
further
much.
discussion?
That's very
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks.
This
Thank
was
you.
really educational. Now move on to item 9, for approval. 2018 annual town election ballot questions, treasurer collector conversion. Douglas W. Heim, town council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board will recall, at the 2017 annual town meeting voted to place a question on the ballot for this year about whether the town treasurer and collector of taxes would and should be converted from an elected position into an appointed position. We're essentially bound by that vote. There's a very specific question that needs to be articulated on the ballot. It's set forth by Chapter 41, Section 1B. The brief description is just meant to be as neutral as possible to describe what's going on. And so what's in front of you is really not that controversial. I think as it says in the memo, and just to remind folks, the treasurer, regardless of outcome, would serve the total of his term. I know that Mr. Carmen's here, but even if the question passes, Mr. Carmen continues to serve. So we have a decent amount of time, if the question were to pass, to do things like file special legislation to amend the Town Manager Act. We're really just talking about putting on the ballot the question as approved by town meeting last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? Yeah, Mr.
Just to
Stone.
be clear, is the description printed on the ballot itself?
Typically, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else here?
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, well, motion by Ms. Mahan, second by Mr. Greeley. Mr. Carmen, did you have anything you wanted to add to the discussion, or? You're good. You're good. Okay, I think we're all good. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your work on this. Next, we move on to, for approval, a request to join the Metro Mayor's Coalition. Mr. Chapdelaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I provided the board a memo briefly describing my interest in pursuing Arlington's membership in the Metro Mayor's Coalition. My interest in this dialogue started several years ago in talking with the MAPC and trying to figure out whether there was a match in terms of the interests and planning efforts of Arlington with the member communities in the Metro Mayor's Coalition. I know it's in front of the board, but for those here and those watching at home, the current members are Boston, Braintree, Brookline, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Malden, Melrose, Medford, Newton, Quincy, Revere, Somerville, and Winthrop. Some of those communities, Arlington having more similarities than others. And initially, several years ago, much more of their focus was on public safety and pursuing Shannon grants to curb youth violence in some of those communities. So at that time, there wasn't particularly a great nexus for a lot of the efforts here in Arlington. But more recently, in the past year or so, the group has started to really focus their efforts on climate change adaptation, and then most immediately, a regional housing planning initiative. And what brought this back to the front burner was their announcement, must have been 2 months ago now, of these 14 communities working on collaboratively trying to combat the housing shortage in the region, to maintain and build a stronger region. And I had a number of people in the community reaching out to me saying, why isn't Arlington part of this initiative? I think it was because the press was a little unclear that this wasn't a pre-existing coalition, and it sounded like 14 just thoughtful communities had banded together for that particular initiative. But that being said, it did encourage me to begin the dialogue again with the MAPC that manages this coalition, then expanding that dialogue to Mayor Curtatone next door. So the mayor and I met, and he's the chair of the coalition right now. That's why he was the focal point. We met before the holidays to discuss this and whether or not he thought Arlington would be a fit for these dialogues. He absolutely did. We're all these communities, Arlington included, are doing climate change adaptation work. We border Somerville and Cambridge. We share the brook, we share the waterways, the watershed, so having another opportunity to dialogue with them and plan makes a lot of sense to me. Cambridge, as we know, down in the Alewife area is doing a tremendous amount of housing development. Somerville as well, beginning now with a much larger renovation at the apartment complex, across the Parkway from Arlington. And they're looking to start moving towards looking at transportation, again, which we have a great sort of border with Cambridge and Somerville, bus rapid transit, access to Davis Square, access to Alewife, whatever it may be. So I think this is an appropriate measure for the town to make sure that as we continue to look at voters and in the upcoming years, consider asking for more resources to balance the budget, to let them know we are cooperating with all of our neighbors as best possible, finding efficiencies, finding ways to plan and use our resources as best possible. So before doing that, I didn't feel comfortable just on my own joining and making the expenditure of funds to pay the dues, so I wanted to have a discussion with the board and ask for your endorsement of requesting membership in the coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Chaplain. Any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? Ms. Rowe, Mr. Dunn.
I worked with the Metro mayors to make the Community Preservation Act work better for those communities, and the coalition was, at that time, headed by Jay Ash, but it was a wonderful group of very thoughtful political people who were trying to do good for their communities, and I think it would be wonderful if you joined them, because it's this, a lot of, they sort of switch jobs, but a lot of the people are the same, and I think it would be really, really helpful, especially in housing, because I think that our housing needs are very similar, and I would hope that the focus on transportation would be part of that housing discussion. But I'm all for it. I think it's terrific that we are going to join it.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunn.
I'm definitely, I support it, and the thing that really got me was the housing element. And so many of the members of the board will recognize that I have certain themes that I come to. I'm developing a new theme, and that is that I'm really worried about what the effects of the increase in real estate prices are on our town. And I think about, so like I read a number, I haven't seen it was verified, but it was, they said 20% increase year over year in Arlington housing prices. That is going to, if that, like then that isn't like just a one-year blip, it's this ongoing thing. That is going to fundamentally change our town. And the things that we do in the long range, the things we do in the town planning documents, like the things that we do in bylaws, the things we do in zoning, like anything we do in there is going to be ineffective about the changes that are driven by that kind of underlying financial change in the town and who can live here. And I also think, and I'm putting the town manager on the spot, he said to me privately that he thinks this is one of the things that, and I think you've said this publicly too, this is not something we can control within the town. Like we don't have the tools to turn that around. And so I think that this type of regional group is more likely to have an impact than anything that we can do simply here in town. So that was a big picture speech.
I, of course, support this. Was that your motion, Ms. Rowe?
Yes, please, to support
Unless
it.
Dan already seconded
I
it?
sure did.
Okay, so,
Thank you, Mrs. Mahan.
everyone knows sort of my modus operandi of being a pest, any chance I can. I'm thoroughly supportive of this, and this is the kind of initiative that, you know, when you became Arlington's town manager, that was one of your strong traits that you highlighted of what type of manager you would be, you know, looking for adapting to changes in the future and seeking opportunities. And to me, this is really short change for something like that. So I'm 100% commendable on that. I am only asking this question, anticipating the answer is no, but I just want to ask it anyways. It would be a stretch under climate changes, adaptation, and mitigation, but one of, and Ms. Rowe is very well, all my colleagues are well versed on this, but she's going to know why I'm asking. Would this particular group be able to provide, it's okay if it's no, a forum or an opportunity regarding one of the longstanding issues for people who live in East Arlington, having to deal with the MWRA, the CSO outfalls that everyone says, you know, they should be eliminated, and MWRA projected they would be out, you know, 50 years from now, and we're like probably 18, 20 years into that. Would this be that kind of group we could utilize that way, or no? I'm just...
I think I would say that that is a possibility. It would put Arlington, I guess most directly with me at a seat at the table, to be sitting with the Cambridge City Manager and the Somerville Mayor and other leaders and have it be raised as an issue. I mean, I don't want to say it could guarantee it will change it, but...
And you know what, I wouldn't want you to do it until we had the joint meeting between the Board of Selectmen and the town manager where we set our goals and everything, because I'm not saying my colleagues would or would not support me, it's just, you know, me, that never ending, I want some commitment to eventually close up those CSO discharges and outfall pipes along Alewife Brook. So that's something perhaps when we have our joint meeting in June, July, that we can discuss, and if the majority of the board agrees. But if for some reason that happens and it's just not the right vehicle for it, that's fine too. I'm just trying to take a crack at that
no, I
same
think
old
it's-
thing I harp about. Thank you.
Totally reasonable.
So I certainly support this. I think that being together with other communities in the inner core, it certainly gives our voice, you know, greater weight, and also being able to share the costs of just some additional planning support. I mean, the environment and the economy rise and fall as a region, and so it makes absolute sense if you're working with these communities, and thank you for the initiative. So I have a motion by Ms. Rowe, seconded by Mr. Dunn. Is there any further, Mr. Crilly?
No, I think it's a great idea, I support it. I'm just curious, so are all of the rest of them elected officials versus appointed?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. So
thank
four,
you. It was a
four,
good one.
yeah.
Oh, wait, I had to make room for his head.
4 of the current members are represented by managers. So Chelsea has a city manager, Cambridge has a city manager, Brookline has a town administrator, and Winthrop has a town manager. So it's not, even though it's called the Mayor's Coalition, and 10 are mayors, there are appointed officials involved.
Awesome, I meant nothing by that question.
No.
Melrose has a mayor? I thought Melrose is not a
Melrose
town.
has a mayor. Melrose has a mayor.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Kevin, he'd prefer if you refer to him as President Chapdelaine.
That's right, Saturday night.
We'll get there.
Should be president.
Okay. Anything else, Mr.
No, that's it, thank you, sir.
Okay. We have a, or Mr. Dunn. On a motion by Ms. Rose, seconded by Mr. Dunn. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much for the initiative. We now move on to, for approval, interim plan for comptroller. And before I recognize Mr. Chaplain, I do want to say that we did advertise for the comptroller vacancy. We did get a number of resumes in. We reviewed the resumes, but after taking a look at them, the consensus view is that we would reopen and repost the job to get a larger pool before we move forward, which does necessitate some interim steps for filling the comptroller function while we complete that and execute that search. So the manager has graciously put together a proposal here for our consideration to meet that need. Mr. Chapdelaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before the board is a memo that outlines what the interim plan or interim proposal is. It's really two parts. One is naming an acting comptroller, Cindy Fields, who's been the longtime assistant comptroller, and paying her a grade within the management pay scale to run the day-to-day operation and serve as comptroller, sign payroll warrants and any other documents that need to be signed by the comptroller. And she's agreed to the amounts that are contained within the memo and amenable to serving as such. But additionally, bringing in for 1 day a week, Tony Mertz, who is a municipal accountant. She currently serves as the Malden School CFO for 4 days a week. She's worked in Arlington performing some chart of accounts analysis for Mr. Visquet when he was here, and also served as Arlington's interim school CFO in between Ms. Johnson and the hiring of Mr. Denizio. So she has familiarity with Arlington, with the accounts, with Munis, and so that's very beneficial. And what we would be doing is having her come in 1 day a week to make sure all of the sort of larger matters are being met. She would be reviewing payroll, she'd be reviewing accounts receivable warrants, running any munis reports that the current staff aren't comfortable or don't have the training to run, and overall just making sure that all the goals and responsibilities of the comptroller's office are being met while we're in this interim period.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chapdelaine. Do you have any questions or comments? Yeah, Ms. Mahan.
First, I'm very pleased, and please express our thanks to Ms. Mertz on stepping in once again. I know when she was the interim CFO at 1.5 days a week, we were really getting an employee, in my opinion, in terms of her work product, closer to like 2.5, 3 days, even though she was only in 1.5. So she's very well versed, extremely knowledgeable, and as the town manager said, knows Munis, is extremely familiar with our comptroller policies and procedures and protocols. So I wish we could somehow get her away from where she works. I know perhaps, it may have been tried, and unfortunately, she's graciously willing to step in once again in this interim capacity. The second thing is, and I don't want to throw, a wrench into any of the process, but where we're starting over again, I thought I had articulated this last time, and obviously I didn't, and that's my fault. But since we're doing it over, and I know I've had conversations with various people, and I don't want to mess up the makeup of the committee, but I was thinking where our comptroller, number one, is the Board of Selectmen's representative on the retirement board. Number two is 20% of the vote on the retirement board, that perhaps in the next round of gathering resumes, curriculum vitaes, and/or extending the outreach, because, the retirement board, mostly around administration, the administrator of it, also, goes to different conferences and things like that. It could also be a possible resource for getting the word out, that perhaps even, it doesn't have to be a voting member, but I think it might be beneficial if we had the administrator from the retirement board working with you all in whatever capacity. But I definitely think it would be an asset, and I think it might help us widen the pool of candidates. So I just wanted to put that before my colleagues and the manager. If anyone has feelings that that's a really bad idea, but.
That's a fine idea.
Would that be okay, Mr. Chapman?
Yeah, I think we could ask Mr. Greco to both circulate the posting around his professional association, and maybe we can talk about this, but maybe involve him with some resume screening when we get another batch of resumes.
Whatever you deem appropriate, but thank you.
And if I may, just to sort of try to reiterate or just restate what Mr. Curo said, we're definitely not throwing out the resumes we received, just sort of extending the posting. So I don't want any potential candidates who may be tuning in, God bless them, to think that, that anybody's being dismissed. We just want to broaden.
As I said, expand the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any further questions or motions?
Move approval?
Motion by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Grilli. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chapdelaine. We now move on to the town manager performance evaluation process. Mr. Chapdelaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think now at least a majority of the board has been as shocked as me that it's been another year and time to kick off this process again. So provided for the board's review and comment and potential change is a memo outlining a timeline for the process as well as the evaluation instrument. So let me just open that up. It basically tracks what we have done in years past, where we would start the process in early February with my provision of a narrative self-evaluation and an updated goals document. The board would then have a month to review those materials and complete the evaluation instrument. We then give 2 weeks to the chair to work with Karen Malloy, the HR director, to compile all the scores from that evaluation instrument into one comprehensive document. And then in the first week of April, or the first meeting in April, have that comprehensive evaluation discussed in an open meeting by the board.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Move receipt with a question.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Mahan. Seconded by Mr. Dunn. Ms. Mahan.
I don't know if the chair has had these discussions, or if this is the appropriate time for the chair or the town manager to clarify this point, the last point being that in the contract, we have the clause that the board needs to give 1 year notice if we were going to renew your contract, which I most certainly am forever, but anyways.
If you're not going to renew the
Right,
contract. Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, is that something that we need to state, that we are renewing it? Like, you cited that it's in there, do we have to acknowledge that somehow to say, we definitely are renewing, or you just did that to highlight that that's in there?
Yeah, I think thank you for bringing that up. I think the only action that would be necessary, and I wanted to bring that to the board's attention so that there would be no surprises if that was the intention of a board member to suggest that direction. But the only action would be necessary is if the board was contemplating non-renewal, they would have to take an action, but otherwise, there's no action necessary.
Do you seriously think, after this board moving heaven and HE double hockey sticks to keep you here in Arlington?
Crossing Ts and dotting
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Heim has a point.
I have heard him refer to himself as the president, Mr. Chair. So if you're going to move, you got to move fast.
This is not a wedding. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I've seen him
If
wearing
any
an
members
admiral's hat.
do wish to bring up this matter, you can ask that it be placed on an agenda item for an upcoming meeting before February 10th. I don't anticipate hearing from any of my colleagues, but
And I appreciate the die-hard Eagles fans' strong words of praise for our town.
Oh, it's public now.
Sorry, I have to.
We'll get there.
we're devolving. So we've got a motion by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Dunn. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chaplin. And I really thank you for your commitment to this process. It's extremely important all around. We now move on to final votes and comments, articles for review. Article 3, bylaw amendment, residential construction, open excavation, demolition activity, regulations, neighbor notifications and meetings, and Article 4, bylaw amendment, parking benefits district expenditures. Mr. Heim, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to note that on your desk, one of the members of the Board of Selectmen contacted me about my draft final votes and comments to articulate a desire for further changes. And so I have codified those changes in this document if the board is so inclined to further revise the final vote and comment draft. I'll go through what they are very quickly. On Article 3, the board will recall that there was a desire for some additional process to make sure it was clear that this exemption for certain types of roadway work wasn't going to be too broad and encompass too much. And the way of achieving that was to make sure that there was some sort of permission process to become exempt from the noise abatement bylaws' ordinary hours of operation, or not exempt, but to, give folks the opportunity to work outside those 9 to 5 and 8 to 6 hours, which is the industry standard for road paving, water main replacement, stuff like that. It was suggested to me that making the distinction that I was offering between public works and public utilities, having some of those exemptions go before the town manager and some of them come before this board, was not really operationally efficient for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that not a lot of the permits that might be covered come before the Board of Selectmen. A lot of them just go right to engineering, such as a trench permit. So that's one change. Basically, A and B were collapsed into a single point about the town manager vetting folks before they would have the opportunity to work outside the hours of 9 to 5 or 8 to 6. In Article 4, the changes are a little bit more subtle. You'll see them in red line, but basically, the point here is to make it all that much clearer that what we're talking about is an non-binding vote to endorse a recommended action of the Finance Committee or Capital Planning Committee by town meeting, because town meeting doesn't technically have the authority to restrict the appropriation of parking benefit district revenue. So essentially, you're agreeing to a process that, just like CDBG, you don't necessarily have to agree to. We're codifying that we're going to follow this process, but town meeting is really taking a non-binding vote. And my understanding, and I'll obviously yield the floor to the selectmen who wanted to propose these changes, is that essentially we just want to be transparent about what's going on, even more so than we already were, that we're creating a process, but we don't want there to be confusion. Town meeting, we want town meeting's endorsement, but it's not required by law. So that, I'll see if there's any other comments or changes that folks want to make, and obviously open up for further discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Heim. Any further comments, questions? Yep.
I'm the unnamed selectman who worked with town council, and I appreciate his work his work with me. So on the private way one, there were two examples that were in my head that I was thinking about. One is the electric wire that runs underground from Winchester down Route 3 down to the substation. Like, we don't want to close Route 3 during rush hour. And so that would be an example of something, but also they work on that cable sometimes during for non-emergency situations. And so that's the type of thing where I want a smart professional to look at this and say, you know, we're better off waking some people up than we are closing the road. And so that's why, and the other example was just very similar, but it was like anything to do with replacing a gas main. Like when water mains are already our contractors, so that was already under the authority of town manager, and I wanted to put those under the town manager as well. So that was my motivation for asking for that change. And on the other one, I just didn't want town meeting to be confused that we were giving, that we were implying that they had a power that they don't. And so this was just trying to, I wasn't trying to change anything of the substance of that, I was just trying to change the optics of it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to note one other thing. If the board is inclined to adopt any changes with respect to Article 4, I'll make sure to report those changes back to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee did endorse the article as it had its previous iteration. It's just the timing of these things is difficult to make sure that everybody gets the most up-to-date, version. But this version incorporates some changes that the Finance Committee wanted in terms of minor wording and things like that, but as well as Mr. Dunn's suggestions, if the board's so inclined.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
Move approval, final votes and comments?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Ms. Rowe. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to
Thank you.
our special town meeting. So now we move on to new business. Ms. Kapelka.
Nothing other than I just wanted to remind everyone that Friday at noontime is the closing hour for the annual town meeting for any warrant articles to be received. And also, I just wanted you all to know, do you like your new card?
It's very nice. It is very nice. Thank you very much. And I'm sure it's coming across on the TVs very well, too. No question. Thank you very much. How many, just out of curiosity, how many 10 registered voter articles have we received so far?
I just received partly one tonight. That's it. That's it.
Thank you.
Sounds like that proponent's way ahead of everyone.
Mr. Heim.
Thank you, Mr. Curo. So I want to note that I appreciate very much a number of diverse residents who have submitted warrant articles for me to take a look at. We have a healthy number of them from a number of different folks about a number of different things that are interesting topics. I also want to share my appreciation for other town officials and committees and commissions who have taken the opportunity to make sure that they work with me on trying to get their warrant articles in the best form as possible. So not commenting on the substance, but I really appreciate folks following that process. Secondly, I just want to highlight something that's important. The credit here really goes to the City of Newton's Assistant Corporation Counsel Alan Mandel, as well as Kevin Bott out of Lexington. We joined, as the board may recall, in an effort to oppose an Eversource rate case to change a whole variety of things, which you may have seen in the news. But the really key piece for Arlington's town government, God bless you, was that they were trying to change the net metering credits, and it would have affected the return we get on our solar panel investments. So the good news is we managed to successfully oppose that change, and the town manager offered fantastic testimony in support of opposing that. But the bad news is that they didn't give us the grandfathering that we wanted to put this issue to bed permanently. So that issue is something that we'll have to continue to keep an eye on if Eversource comes back. But the good news is that we collectively, a number of municipalities, really led by the city of Newton, were able to oppose that piece of the rate change. I don't know if you have any further comments on that.
Nope, I think that's right on.
I'm sorry, I also want to just say one or two other things. A quick update on the Mugar matter, because people are asking about it a lot. Our special counsel filed a reply brief with respect to our ongoing litigation with the state to get the information that we really should be entitled to make our 1.5% calculation for safe harbor status. DHCD and the Attorney General's office opposed that motion. We think we're in really good posture to get that information, but that's been keeping everything before the Housing Appeals Committee in a holding pattern, and I just wanted to let you guys know that that matter is now fully briefed, and at some point the court will issue a decision on that, and maybe the HAC matter will resume. I'm not totally sure of how quickly the court will issue a decision.
Is this the addresses for the group homes that you're?
It's data about, among other things, group homes that we're forced to sort of, guesstimate, because we're not given that information by the state, even though it's part of the state's calculation.
I just wanted to double check, because I have to report at the Arlington Land Trust tomorrow night.
And then finally, I just want to note that the Super Bowl takes place before a special town meeting. I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I'll be armed with batteries and snowballs. I respect the gavel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Yes. How much time do we have to give him to tell him he's fired?
I'm sorry, Mr. Howard.
All in good fun.
Mr. Chapdelaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So very briefly, as I had mentioned to the board at the end of the last meeting under new business, we did attend the MMA annual meeting this past Friday and Saturday. On Friday, I went in with the chairman, Sandy Pooler, Mike Rademacher, and Jim Feeney. So we had a good Arlington representation there, and then went back in Saturday as well, again with Mr. Curo. And it was a very good meeting. I'll simply say the highlights were seeing Jeff Chunglo, our veteran service agent, our director of veteran services, presenting on best practices in veterans benefits in the state. And no surprise, he was excellent and very well received, and I think he helped out the thinking of a lot of the participating communities. And also Governor Baker was there, and he did announce his budget that he'll be submitting later this week will include a 3.5% increase in unrestricted general government aid, which is better than what we've budgeted. So that's just the first budget. There's still the legislative budgets to come, but that's very, very positive news as the budget process begins at the state level. Shifting to...
Before you move on, because my new business is going to be pertaining to the meeting too, so might as well keep it thematic. I think we all want to congratulate Mr. Chapdelaine. He was installed as the president of the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association at the meeting. It is a very humbling experience to walk through this meeting with Mr. Chapdelaine and with Mr. Pooler. Everyone knows them, and they're all stopping. They want to know about Arlington's capital budgeting process. They want to know this, that, and the other. It was extraordinary. It was an excellent meeting. All of our constitutional officers were in attendance, including the governor. Our U.S. senators had to actually send video messages because there was this little thing known as a shutdown down in Washington. Two other things. Arlington came up a lot. So I was in one session on support for families and youth, and one of the presenters there, I think it was a woman from Westwood, was talking about the range of youth supports the communities give. She mentioned some Western Mass community she couldn't recall that it does a youth parade, and that's what they do, and that's what they concentrate on. She said, and it runs the gamut to a community like Arlington, which has 6 or 7 employees, accepts insurance, runs a full-fledged mental health support service, and really called out Arlington, and I was there incognito. She didn't, there was no pandering. Also note that Ally Carter, and unless you were going to announce this, were you?
No, go for it.
Yeah, Ally Carter and Jenny Raitt came in on the last evening. Arlington received an innovation award for our vacant commercial industrial property registry for driving the vacancies in the center down from 17 to 5. A lot of the other communities, they came up to us and were talking to us about it because they felt it was really transferable. And just as an aside, there were 3 innovation awards. One of the other innovation awards actually went to Orleans, and our former planning director, Mr. McLennan, was there in his guise as a selectman for a project they're doing, growing oysters to combat nitrogen pollution in their waterways. So it was interesting to see the Arlington connections there. So all in all, a very, very good session. So thank you. I'm sorry.
No, please, thank you. So the only other thing I had to add is, as the board knows, the FY19 budget proposals from the town manager are on your desks, and I'll work with the chair to perhaps make a more detailed presentation at the next meeting of the board in regards to the budget. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Greeley.
No new business, sir, thank you.
Ms. Mahan.
Just an FYI, I asked the board administrator, I received an email, and I just asked her to forward to you all as a FYI. So I just wanted to, I know we all have hundreds and hundreds of emails, so I just wanted to draw your particular attention to it. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dunn.
We got an email in December that I'd meant to bring up in new business, and I forgot. And so
Isn't there a statute of limitations?
you're going to like this one, Mr. Greeley. Looking at it's an email received by Wayne Trinard, our town engineer. Look at the DPW website. It looks like you're Bill Copperthorne's boss. Please, I live on Bow Street, where we've had months of water, work on our street to replace the water. I wanted to let you know how great Bill's been through the weeks of hassle and delays. I know his title's assistant town engineer, but you might as add mayor in training. He was present on the job many days when I came home. He took the time in a very friendly, easygoing, informative way of walking the streets and explaining the progress to me and all of my neighbors, addressing our concerns empathetically and capably. And she goes on to talk about other things that he did during the process of the house. And it goes in, and how she had just gotten hooked up to the water and the project was done. This may sound strange, but while I'm not going to miss the detours, vehicles, and holes in the street, I'll miss chatting with Bill. Just wanted you to know how terrific he's been. And I think that was just like a great letter about some of the service we're providing.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for reading that. Ms. Rowe?
No new business.
Okay, and I think that I've covered all my new business, so I'll entertain a
Move to
motion.
adjourn?
A motion by Ms.
Second.
Mahan, seconded by Ms. Rowe. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The next scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be on February 5th, 2018. This meeting is adjourned. Good night, Arlington.